It's a funnel strategy when you're hiring. You have to get more people in the funnel. The more you get in the funnel, better your results. And then we do a group interview via Zoom. And this idea we had actually borrowed or from Cameron Herald. We implemented it where there's 8 to 10 people in a group interview, candidates, and we only ask 5 or 6 questions. And a competitive advantage of that is that you get one, you can interview a lot of candidates much quicker, so it takes less time. And it allows you to see all of the candidates side by side.
You're listening to the E-Commerce Influence Podcast with Austin Bronner and Andrew Foxwell. If you want honest, transparent, and tangible results that deliver lasting value and revenue, this is your podcast.
As an e-commerce brand, you know that managing your cash flow is the key to understanding and growing your business. That's exactly where Pilot can help. They're a bookkeeping company built for e-commerce brands. Pilot pairs you with a dedicated finance expert who knows your business inside and out, sends you monthly reports that include your inventory statement, merchant fees, COGS, and more. Plus, Pilot syncs with Shopify, PayPal, Magento, and more, which means that your books are always accurate. No more clicking around in QuickBooks. You always know where your money is. If you want to get an accurate picture of your cash flow and get your books right and grow confidently, Pilot's offering 20% off 6 months of bookkeeping right now by going to ecommerceinfluence.com/pilot, and you can sign up there.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Influence Podcast. My name is Austin Bronner.
And I'm Andrew Foxwell. And let me tell you, we have a really great episode for you today. Very, very, very happy to have these guests on.
We are. We are very lucky to have been able to get the attention of two very, very incredible entrepreneurs who have built a really great business over the last 4.5, 5 years. And we were able to get them to come in and talk to us for almost an hour and share some of the amazing tips on their crazy ride to being the 20th fastest growing company in the entire country.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many things that they've done really, really well. One of the things that they've done and they talk about in the episode is how they have built a team of over 50 people in really, I think it's only, a few years, and how they have identified exactly what the customer is looking for, how they have identified and built upon, different product lines and the diversification of those product lines, among many other things that we get into. So, if you're running your own company and you're kind of wanting to talk about how you can sustainably grow and build the team properly, this is an incredible episode to start with for you.
And just to give you some context, Garret and Deeanne, they're married entrepreneurs, which is very rare. We don't often get to interview people together. They started Kindred bravely. They won the Shopify Build a Bigger Business competition. They just most recently hit number 20 on the Inc. 5000 list. And like Andrew said, they have a team of over 50, and they hired almost everybody remotely, and they go deep into how they did that. So without further chatter, we'll dive into and bring them into the episode.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Austin. Thanks, Andrew. Really exciting to be here.
No, it's fun. I mean, I think the last time I saw you, Garret, we had lunch at True Foods in Austin, and one of the things that when we invited you on the show, I remember I wanted to kind of figure out how we initially got in touch, because I've known you like through email and so forth for quite some time, and I looked through my emails. And I realized you replied back to a podcast episode back in 2016. And that's how we initially got in contact, which I think was around the time that you guys just kind of kicked off your business. Be a year or so after, something like that.
It would have been, yeah. So we launched Kindred Bravely in 2015, February of 2015.
But things were probably really kicking off by 2016.
Yeah.
And you guys have done some really, really incredible things together. I mean, the business has grown tremendously. you've won the Shopify Build a Bigger Business competition. I know most recently, Garrett, you let me know you guys hit number 20 on the Inc. 5000 list. You guys have built a very, very large remote team, which we're going to talk about today a little bit. I'd love to take it back to kind of the beginning a little bit and hear, like, when did you guys know that you had something that was going to take off, and how did you initially get started?
So I think, like many good stories, ours began out of a true personal need. And we have two boys who are 6 and 8 now. And 5 years ago, when we started, my youngest was 1 and still breastfeeding. And I just really wanted a comfortable pair of nursing pajamas to keep me warm at night. And they were on my Christmas list. I didn't get them. My birthday's in January. They were also on my birthday list, didn't get them. And Garrett took pity on me and said, hey, let's go shopping. I know how much you really want some new nursing friendly pajamas. And, after looking at all the stores nearby and coming up completely empty handed, I turned online and found, a smattering of options. But how it really came together is one night we'd finally gotten the kids to bed, and I was opening all those packages online of possible nursing pajamas, and I found that I really liked, the bottoms of one set and the top of another one was okay, but what I really wanted was kind of a combination of things, and the fabric of a different set was even better. And I thought to myself, man, I can't be that unusual. All I really want is a pair of nursing pajamas that are cute, stylish, comfortable, and actually work for breastfeeding. And so I said to Garrett, he was working in the office. He was, actively looking for an e-commerce idea. I said, hey, what do you think about maternity and breastfeeding wear? I know exactly what nursing moms want. And
yeah, that was the beginning.
It's not like it just really happened. Like, our worlds were colliding. He was looking for a business idea. I was looking for nursing friendly pajamas at the time. And that idea just took off for us.
I think I knew it was going to be a success from day one. I just had this internal confidence, like I'm not going to let it fail. This is, my 4th startup now. At the time, I was running an advertising agency, a digital marketing agency, and was feeling pretty burned out and wanted to do something different. Knew I wanted to do something in D2C in the e-commerce space. So I think I was optimistic from day one. It took Deanne a little while to get convinced because it was slow at first.
Right. I mean, the first product we brought to market is that pair of nursing pajamas that I desperately wanted. Only in hindsight, by the time we developed and made our first run, it was summer of 2015. And, June, July is not the very best time to be launching pajamas. They're more of a fall winter item. And so it was slow. It's not that we had like an immediate success from that first product. But what I did hear immediately from moms was, wow, this fabric is amazing and comfortable. And I'd given them to like all my friends. Literally, the first order was 500. And I think we gave away 200 just to get reviews, to get noticed, to get feedback. And they said, this is amazing. It's so soft, comfortable. Could you make something like this for bras? Because my bras are really uncomfortable. And, after hearing that comment, dozens of times, I was like, wow, yeah, well, I thought I was making nursing pajamas, but what moms really want is comfortable bras. And come to think of it, yeah, I'm still looking for a comfortable bra too. That had been kind of intimidating to start with. But, once I had made one product, it became how to make something better and more comfortable became, it came into view. And so I think, back to your earlier question, when did we really know we were onto something? I think it was once we launched a few bras, because that's really where moms are craving comfort, including myself and, all the customers that told us that. And so we started with a couple of lounge bras, the French terry, the organic cotton, and there's some of our best sellers still today. Because, ask the women in your life who isn't looking for a comfortable bra, breastfeeding, pregnant, or just any woman. Like, everybody's looking for comfort.
Sure. Well, you guys, when you did that, you started out on Amazon selling. Are we correct in that?
Yes.
When you started on Amazon, and then you moved eventually over to Shopify, which is that's a kind of an unusual transition to some degree. How do you think about this transition, and how did that go? And what were the kind of pros and cons, or what were the lessons learned from that transition?
So we did launch on Shopify and Amazon at the same time, but we just didn't put any resources into Shopify. It was basically, I don't know, maybe it made it one sale a month, I want to say. And I think for us, I understood and had been doing a lot of just reading and research into Amazon's ecosystem. And it was, 2015, Amazon was still very much the wild, wild west as far as rankings and how you could rank and what it took. And so I understood that ecosystem really well. And that was really our flywheel to start just launching and ranking products on Amazon, because there was no one in our space. At the time there were, I think it was like ASM 4 or 5. There were all these programs on how to launch your new product on Amazon. And everyone was saying, stay out of clothing space, which I loved. I was like, that's great. Don't get into clothing.
More room for us.
More room for us, because there was plenty of it there. And we also benefited because, Amazon at the time wasn't yet, but it was pretty close, or did shortly after become the largest clothing retailer in the US. So more and more, they were pushing soft lines in that business pretty hard, growth there. And then, I would say it was really when we won the Shopify Build a Bigger Business competition. So 2017, the beginning of 2017, that we started pushing Shopify growth. By then, Amazon was large enough that it was throwing off enough cash to really spend money to grow Shopify store sales.
We always knew that we wanted to have our own brand, our own website, and our community. But it takes cash, and it takes resources. It takes, additional team members really to make that happen. So in the beginning, I think it was and looking back, it was a good decision, not to do both at the same time, but to wait until we had enough revenue from Amazon to be able to fund the growth on our own website.
And just for listeners right now, we are recording during the quarantine, and it's real life here. We've got kids at home. All of us work from home remotely most of the time, so it's not that much of a challenge. But also now you've got kids at home, and so if you hear any background, that's just real life. We're recording podcasts with school being out.
So real life, my 6-year-old just brought me his crested gecko to hold. So we have another attendee.
Well, that's nice.
I think you guys have, like you mentioned, have built a really, really cool brand, and your voice really comes out across the entire site about how you speak to moms, how you communicate. Dan, you're the face, and it's very clear that you guys have built something that you stand for. Right now, if you're looking at kind of the state of where Amazon and Shopify, would you guys go about it the same way? Would you build Amazon first if you were to launch over again? Would you change up your strategy? What have you learned kind of about the evolving space of Amazon and also building a brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I know the answer. I can tell you what we've done now, because we have launched a second brand. We launched a brand in October of 2019 called Baby Piper to just the general population. So just women who are looking for a comfortable bra. That one we didn't launch on Amazon. So we only launched it on Shopify with no intention of ever launching it on Amazon. I think the Amazon ecosystem has changed a lot. Like I said, 2015, it was fairly straightforward. A9 was, at the time, I think obviously less developed, for lack of a better word, and pretty easy to rank on. As long as you had sales velocity, you could do giveaways at the time and a lot of other things to get your product out there and to generate sales and rank. And now it's much harder. Even when we launch products on Amazon, it feels like the space is much more crowded. Obviously, the algorithms changed. So if we were doing it again, would I launch on both? Would I push on Amazon first? I don't know. Other than Baby Piper, we only launched on Shopify. Dan, do you have any thoughts there?
I don't think I would approach it the same way. I think in order to be successful on Amazon, you either need to have a product that is really just search driven, instead of having, a brand or a brand ethos that customers are looking to engage with. So I think it really depends on what it actually was, what product I was bringing to market. But if we were doing the exact same brand, if we were doing the same brand again, I probably wouldn't start on Amazon.
We've heard a similar story from others that have gone a similar path that you did, where you just maintain so much more of the control from Shopify from that standpoint, particularly within the brand voice, and the power of the demand capture of Amazon is very present, but it can create, it's very hot or cold. Something's going to go, let's say 20% of the time, I guess I've heard, Austin, you can comment on this and you guys comment on this too, is like, it goes great. And it's like, we sold out really quickly. And then like 80% of the time, it's like you move like 5 units a month, It's just like not really moving that much because there is so much noise and so much competition. So I think that it's interesting to hear your take there on really the shift that's taken place recently.
And I think, especially for an inventory business, there's a lot of risk in having those wild swings in your supply chain demands. Like if you're out of stock and losing sales, that's a great position to be in for a little while. But then if you're overstocked and can't move the units and you don't have the control over that, or you seem to not be able to move what you have, like that's also not a great position to be in. So I just think you have a lot more amount of predictability, reliability, and control when you're doing the whole process end to end of the channel.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you. Transitioning into the next question about being married entrepreneurs. My wife Gracie and I are married entrepreneurs. Austin and Carly have just transitioned into this. You guys work together. You started this together. You work together, and it's a family business. How do you divide up the responsibilities and roles? And how do you think about this? I'm curious because I think there has been a rise in demand or a rise in curiosity that Gracie and I get a lot about. How do you guys do that together? It's either curiosity or people saying I could never do that, which is like very comical. So how do you think about this? And was it transition natural kind of in terms of, okay, we kind of settled into these roles, or was it very much like, I'm going to do this, you're going to do this, and we'll start?
I think initially the roles were really easy to divide. Me knowing what products moms would want and need and interfacing with customers, like it was a really natural split for me to really own the whole product development, supply chain side, and customer service at first. And Garret, with his background in marketing, branding, sales, like it was really natural for him to own that entire piece. And so I think we had very, complementary skill sets at the start. So I would say we naturally fell into that rhythm pretty easily.
Yeah, great.
That's not to say that it is not hard. I mean, it's definitely hard. Like the separation, I think the hardest part is actually the separation between personal life and business, where like business just creeps in and crowds in. It's like a flood. Like the water will fill every crevice that is fillable.
Yeah.
So like setting up boundaries and safe spaces where work is not controlling the mood, the time, the mental resources is still a constant challenge. And I think it's for any entrepreneur, and anybody who says it's not, like, I want to know what you're doing.
I know there's like Gracie and I was asking each other, it's like, can I bring up a work related topic? So he was like, I have to ask that. And then the other one that always is I've learned is, Gracie, a lot of the work we do is we do courses and in presentations and things. And she has said to me now, like, I think we've been in business 6 years and maybe 3 years ago, she's like, look, I need time to think about things. Like I'm a producer, like I'm just going to put stuff out, right? And like put out a podcast or put out a presentation, put some thoughts down on paper. And Gracie like wants to look at it, take time to consider it. And so that's a really helpful thing. Cause I know that I'll just be like, hey, like you think about it on your own. And that's kind of the way that we collaborate, sitting down and having me sit next to her and be like, see, here's what I was trying to do here. She's like, this is not going to work for me. And so it's kind of like understanding where the boundaries are there in terms of effectively getting things done that, I guess is just natural when you're in business with your spouse.
It's so fascinating to me because you just don't get a chance that often to interview like married entrepreneurs. But as it's grown and it's changed, you said initially it was quite easy because you guys had complementary skill sets. How has that changed? And let's start with that. And then also I want to follow up on Deanne. You mentioned like the things that you do to kind of give yourself space. I'd love to hear a little bit about that as well.
How it's changed. So the first hire we did was customer service, customer care. That's when we knew we were headed to China for a month to meet suppliers, and we needed somebody to answer emails and stuff. So I think slowly we just built out the different departments, but we've all along still maintained kind of our field of ownership per se. So I handle all finance and marketing, and Deanne handles all production and customer care. It's changed more recently, as in since January, we hired a president. And so both of us have probably stepped back more than ever. Deanne, now really you just focus on product.
Yeah, my goal is to actually like not make very many decisions unless they're product related now. Because I think what changes is that the things that brought you initial success will actually keep you from growing beyond a certain point. As in, what brought us early success was the ability to quickly implement an idea, get to market. It was that innate flexibility of being a startup. And, really, we didn't have a big committee to run decisions by. It was Garret and me in the office, and we'd say, yep, let's order it. But those are the same kind of situations that, as a growing company, can actually destabilize you. So you have this tendency toward flexibility, but as you grow and things change, you need to trade in a bit of that flexibility for structure and process. And that's definitely one thing that's changed, but it's also the mark of a growing and a maturing company.
Sure. I would love it if you could kind of give people a picture of like how it has grown, because you guys do have a robust remote team, and the team, I mean, I know it's grown substantially. I think even since we met last time in Austin, Garret, could you kind of a picture of where you guys are at now and how maybe that's evolved over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I guess I can dive in. So we have 50 team members now on the team. And right now, so we hired a new president in January, and she's amazing. We have a CMO, and really under the president, we just divided it up as far as, we have a vacant COO position right now, but kind of an acting operations manager. And under that is customer care, warehouse, because we run our own warehouse, and then operations and projects kind of admin. And then obviously under the CMO is all marketing functions. So for us, that's creative, content, social, and then underneath that also Amazon and Shopify, the third-party channels, the main one being Amazon. And then we have a finance team under a fractional CFO, and then a controller and a couple of accountants. And that's
and almost everyone, even prior to this coronavirus locked in, was already working fully remote. The only team that wasn't was our warehouse. Obviously, they have to be on premise to pick, pack, and ship orders. But prior to this, some key members of the production team and operations would usually meet in the office 2 days a week. So they were San Diego based. But now we've been working totally remote for the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Even that team, yeah.
Yeah, even that one.
But that hasn't been too much of a change.
I mean, that's a lot of people to be doing remote. What are the things that you think make it really successful for you? Is it that you're using Slack and video calls, or is it that you're just checking in more regularly, or setting expectations more clearly, or sort of getting everybody on the same page in terms of KPIs, or all of those things? I'm just curious what makes it effective.
I would say all of the above for sure, Andrew. Specifically for us, I think that probably with the biggest differences are communication. So really just over communicating and having clear written communication. And I think that's probably one of the big differences between a remote and non-remote team is I think teams that are in an office, I think rely much more heavily on verbal communication. You can just drop by somebody's office or cubicle and, chat about something. Whereas remote teams rely much more heavily on written communication.
Yeah, specifically not just remote, but also asynchronous. So, we can't all be working on the same project at the same time. So we do need to have very detailed communication about different projects that are moving forward so that people can work on it during their own work time.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's certainly built on a fairly robust tech stack. We use Slack for probably 80-90% of everything, email for longer things. But then we use a knowledge base. In fact, I just pulled it up when you asked the org chart question. So we use Get Guru for all of our knowledge base. So anybody can pull anything up and it just overlays right over Chrome. And then we use Gorgeous for all of our, customer service, customer care, and Asana for all of our projects. And then G Suite for all of our docs and meetings. We use Zoom meetings for some meetings, but we mostly use Google Hangouts. And then, it's just, I would say trying to overly communicate and then have really clear communication guidelines. So we have guidelines for, how to communicate in Slack even, and remote work policies, like what does it look like remote work, working remotely. And then we function by 90-day sprints. So we kind of borrowed from the last company I was at we did development. And so we kind of took that agile concept and married it to a 90-day sprint. And then that gets broken down into 2 outcomes. And then those 2 outcomes are each 6 weeks. And then those get broken down into 2 weeks. So you are kind of still working by that 2-week sprint on at least one thing. And then we have a huge KPI dashboard that everybody puts their own metrics in. So everybody owns their own numbers, and those all report in, and then we review them weekly.
I think that ownership is one of the big keys to how a remote team functions well. And early on, the hires that we made were very specific. We had a Facebook channel manager first and a Instagram channel manager, and it made people really own a certain area of the business, and you could certainly know right away if someone was over or underperforming. Just really, really clear division of duties.
Yeah, I think that's another big thing. We've never really had generalists. We've always hired people that were experts in their area and then had them just own that one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I think that is definitely unique. And another part I think is unique of what you were saying around the structured communications, kind of like expectations of here's what the expectation is of what remote work looks like. I think a lot of times remote work is interesting because by its nature, it feels ill-defined, or, it's more like, hey, we're a remote work company, so it's flexible, right? It's more results only. And I think I've seen companies run into issues there when it's like remote work means very different things to very different people. And of course you want flexibility, which is the goal of it, but you also want to be able to establish like, this is actually what we mean, like, to get everyone on the same page, because otherwise you're going to have some employees that are doing one thing and some employees that are doing another, and that's not going to be good. But really what you did with going back to the channel specific thing, you approached the channel specific thing like you did with creating the company. Like you looked and said, look, this is a specific niche product with a specific audience that is, a very strong and motivated buyer. And it's very, narrow in that regard, which is actually narrow's big, really. I mean, it's a big market. And you've done that with the channel experts too, saying, hey, look, this is what you're good at. This. So make it, help us to make it the best that it can be, which I think is really cool. Because a lot of times people hire a generalist, and that's very, very difficult. Austin and I have talked about that a number of times.
It's interesting. I'd love to hear more about the process for getting from 0 to 50, right? Like, were there different challenges, different levels that you faced? The reason I bring this up is because I have many clients who are growing quite quickly. Their businesses are growing fast, and they are still small, right? They don't have a team yet, and they're like working like crazy. And they sometimes they hire 1 or 2 people here, and then they got a small team, but they're not there where they're able to kind of take a step back and have these pieces put together. As you look at the hiring process and how you've built your team over time, were there certain milestones or challenges that you guys faced that you could kind of speak to get from just you guys to where you're at now with like quite a larger organization?
Yeah, there's definitely challenges along the way, and looking back, it's easy to sort of forget, what that grind is like, but it's real. So for anybody that's like in it and listening, I want to just offer encouragement that it can and does get better. Like here we are, the business is going to function today. We're going to have sales, even if I didn't do any actual work today. And that was not true a few years ago. So I just want to encourage people that are just really in it that you can do this, one little bit at a time. Milestones along the way.
Looking back, we made our first hire. They were all really need-based as we grew. We did hire a little bit ahead, I would say, in anticipation. And, the first 2016 was the first hire in customer care. So we worked a year where we were just working nights. I was still president and running another company working nights. Deanne and I both for the first year. And then second year, we were large enough to hire one person in customer care. And then that summer we did hire a more of a generalist, a project manager, because we just needed somebody to manage and move projects forward. and that was the second hire. And then along with that was our first Philippine hire. So we hired somebody in the Philippines to help with Amazon, help with back end stuff. And so that was 2016. We had 3 hires that year, and that was manageable. I would say 2017 and 18, we started adding. 2017 is we added a Facebook channel manager, an Instagram channel manager, an email marketing manager, and a Pinterest manager. So 4 hires. They were all hired in, I think it was February or March 2017. So when we have hired, we've tended to hire kind of in almost tranches or groups. And that has made training a bit easier, because really a huge part of this has been training. And the first 90 days of hiring someone is just brutal on, I think, you as an owner in the beginning, if you're doing it, or as a manager, because if they're going to be a success, you basically have your normal day job, and then you have to devote hours each day just training them and onboarding them and offloading, everything that you already know about that channel. And so in the beginning, it was certainly a lot of work hiring, but then it started freeing up more and more time. We hired, I forget how many people in 2017. So I know we hired 4 then. We probably hired 2 more a few months later.
Probably up to.
Yeah. And then I think it was 2018, we hired another 9 or 10, and then 19, like 17 people. I don't know. One year, all of a sudden we looked back and said, wow, we just hired a lot of people. And it certainly wasn't without its, pitfalls and without its stressors. But we really just tried to keep it to specialists in areas where we knew they would, if we added this team member, we would drive more growth, and looked at it that way. What areas or where do we need to grow, and or where are duties that we need to offload so that we can focus on something else. I
remember having a conversation with you. This was, I think, 2019, where you were trying to make the transition to hire a CMO and start hiring at the more executive level.
Yeah.
How did you get to that decision? What was going on in the business that led you to dive down that path? And how did you actually end up hiring that person, or those executive level people that sometimes it can be a little bit more challenging to find?
Yeah. So I'll back up a little bit. We hired our first, I would say, quote, real managers or mid-level managers in 2018. So it would have been September 2018, right around there. We hired a customer care manager and a marketing manager. So I think those were, the business, we had the revenue, and we could start hiring, manager level. And then, you and I talked, Austin, last year, and because we were looking, by then we had grown enough to look at adding executives or executive level positions. We'd had a fractional CFO for a while, but we were looking to hire a CMO, and because that was a lot of my duties. And then later in 2019, we started looking at how we could hire a president. And we made both of those hires. We did hire a CMO in 2019, and then it started on the process of hiring a president in 2019. How we made that decision, I think it was because we had the cash flow to support it. Like, we had grown enough, and we just knew that if we were going to get out of day-to-day operations and continue to grow, that it was.
I think for me, like I could see that what got us to this point wasn't going to get us to the next point, and part of that needed to be like me letting go of some control and letting someone else make decisions that were really going to drive us forward, and me sticking into that one area that I really truly love, which is product development.
Yeah, I think on the marketing side, it was me wanting to just step away and focus on some other things, and not having to, quote, worry about it, not having to deal with the day-to-day, or even the, what's the strategic plan, but being able to have input into that and review it and discuss it, but not being the one driving it.
When you went through and end up actually, just the specifics of like how you actually found that person, were you guys working with a recruiter? What was the process of hiring the executive level? The reason I bring it up is because I have a bunch of clients that are in that space right now, and they're like, we're trying to find a CMO, and they've been running into some roadblocks. I'd love to hear kind of just the specifics around how you interviewed people, if there was false starts, anything you learned during that process.
We've been fortunate in that recruiting has always been easy for us. I know it's not the same for everyone, right? So for us, anytime we've posted a job position or job description, we get a flood of applicants, and mostly made up of people that just love the brand. So I know we posted recently for a social media manager. I think we had 400 applicants.
Wow.
And so, I mean, the executive level wasn't that. It was a bit harder, but for us, recruiting has been one of the surprises or bright spots.
I think that's a significant advantage to anyone who is embracing either a fully or mostly remote team as well. You can recruit from anywhere in the world, and suddenly your pool of qualified people who are going to be passionate about pushing your brand forward is much greater.
Yeah. So specifically for the CMO role, we were hiring for a different position, and one of the candidates that was in that pool we liked, and they had a lot of experience, had previously functioned in that role as head of growth for a different company. And so we actually brought them on in a limited capacity, in a different capacity, just to, kind of test it out and see how it went. And so that person we actually hired to launch Davy Piper. Why don't you come on? It's going to be part-time. We just want you to launch this brand, with the intent of knowing, okay, if that went well, then we would transition them to the CMO role.
That's awesome. That seems like a really smart way to go about that initial test, kind of, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it has benefits and drawbacks as well, but I think like the benefit you get of, knowing how they will produce results for your team and how they'll gel far outweigh any drawbacks.
Yeah, I would say one of the drawbacks were it was a bit much for the team. There was, some team member, I don't know, lack of a better word, just kind of angst over, oh, wow, this person just got promoted way above me. They came in as a contractor, and I didn't know that they were being considered for this other role. So I think you still have to be careful, right? Because there's people's feelings involved. And if you go that route, try to be as transparent as you can up front.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry, I had to bounce there for a second. Now I'm literally bouncing on a bouncy ball with Nora in the front pack. I figured it was appropriate for this episode. So she
are amazing for calming babies, like that up and down vertical motion.
Oh God. Oh, the Ergo Baby bouncy ball combo, it's like, that's what's winning it. That's what's winning the day lately. So hopefully it does knock her out. Actually, that's the goal. Did we talk about growth yet? Did I miss that? Did we talk about like marketing, like growth in terms of what's powering you guys now? Can I ask that question?
We were talking about hiring right now a bit, and
I really want to go into one last thing before transitioning over that, which was specifically around the hiring process, because I listened to a presentation that Garrett you gave about kind of what you guys have done, and I know you have a really interesting process for hiring people, including some group Zoom calls. And some big pushback I've gotten recently from clients is around hiring remotely and like getting to know people remotely, even if it's a remote company. I'd love to hear kind of your process, how it's evolved, and how you guys do these interesting group Zoom calls, if you guys still do them.
Yeah, we do. We can dive into that. I think it's been a huge competitive advantage for us, our interview process and how it's evolved. And so for us, we do group interviews. So it starts with, we'll post a job description, like I mentioned before, the latest one for a social media manager, actually for our second brand for Davy Piper, where we had 400 applicants. And so it'll go out on our social. We do post on Indeed and the normal ones. And all of those applicants flow right into, we used Google Hire previously. They discontinued it. So we've been getting by right now with just a Google form. So they all filter into a Google form, and it uses questions from Top Grading and kind of just a mashup of, the best questions we found over time. So there's a bit of Top Grading in it. There's some really basic stuff that we found that we had to add, which is it has a typing test and it has a mobile typing test in there, little things. And all of that flows into a Google Sheet. So then we'll have, like this last time, about 400 applicants in a Google Sheet. And then the HR team will then go through and filter through those and filter out any applicants that don't fit or not a good fit, and narrow it down. We try to get it down to about 40 applicants, 30 or 40. And we try to always have at least more than 100 applicants to start with, because I really think it's a funnel strategy when you're hiring. You have to get more people in the funnel. The more you get in the funnel, better your results. And then we do a group interview via Zoom. And we've always done it this way. And this idea we had actually borrowed or stolen from Cameron Harold of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I heard him talk about it and then had talked about it with him in person, and he was raving about it. So we implemented it where there's 8 to 10 people in a group interview, candidates, and historically it's always been Deanne and I. We do the group interview. Now it's changed a little bit. It's still usually one of us and then one of the other executives. And we only ask 5 or 6 questions. It's an hour-long interview.
Sometimes only 4.
Sometimes 3 or 4. And we go through the interview and we just go around, and it's a really unique process. And the competitive advantage of that is that you get one, you can interview a lot of candidates much quicker, so it takes less time. You can imagine trying to do 40 interviews one-on-one. That would just eat up way too much time. Whereas if you do those as 4 group interviews, it's only 4 hours. And it allows you to see all of the candidates side by side, which one of I think the hardest parts is on individual interviews is remembering the differences between all the candidates and trying to look through your notes. Even if we use a matrix, a grading matrix, but even if you're using a matrix, I find if you interviewed somebody on Monday and the next person, on Thursday, I start forgetting the differences. It's really apparent in a group interview. And then we ask in that, and this was a Cameron Harold question as well, we softened it a little bit. His is, I think, pretty, quote, brutal. And that is, if you were going to hire one other person in this interview, who would you hire? Who would you want to work with? We ask candidates that, and right on the spot, they're forced to basically look and pick who else they would hire. And it brings kind of an awareness just to see if they were paying attention and who they would hire. And there were some really telling questions that we used, those 4 to 6 questions, to align on culture and get a sense if the candidate would be a good fit. And it's amazing actually, because candidates walk away with a really positive experience. Like, we get great feedback on it, like, oh, that was a lot of fun. That was
they might have been nervous going into it, but overwhelmingly the feedback we get afterwards, wow, that was actually a really fun experience. I learned things in that interview just from listening to the other applicants.
And then we have a matrix that we grade by, and if you get rated a 5, which is the highest, you move to a one-on-one interview. And then one-on-one interviews are very much doing interviews. So we try to have you do your job in some aspect in the interview. So, for example, recently hiring for accounting, I would literally on the interview have an Excel sheet in an email with a series of questions. And the one-on-one interview would only have 3 or 4 questions again. And partway through the interview, I would hit send on the draft that was in my email and say, okay, please check your email. And it would have some instructions. Can you share your screen, open it, and can you, work through this Excel data? Can you pivot it? Can you tell me, this, and this? And you find out right away if people can do their job by just watching. That has led us to, we still have our failures, but it's led overall to really amazing candidates. And to Deanne's earlier point, since we're remote, it's a huge advantage because we can hire anywhere in the world.
And for people that are, feeling nervous, I haven't met you yet. I really need to meet you in person. It doesn't negate if you really feel that, okay, get down to your final 2 and go ahead and fly them in and, actually do sit down and meet them if you need to.
But we've had team members we hadn't met for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First, we knew we were going to be working with them remotely. So what's most important is, are we communicating well in this Zoom call? Are we getting, important work done? Will we be able to work remotely together? Sure.
I think that's super real and true. And that I feel the exact same way during my hiring process. Remotely, I want to see the doing aspect of it, because you can typically in the process figure out if they're going to be good at their job just if you have people do some of the job before hiring and setting up. I would be remiss if I didn't ask, what were some of the other questions that you ask in the interview process? I know you mentioned the one which was really interesting about if we're going to hire somebody else. Any other themes or questions you'd be comfortable sharing about that during that group interview?
I think it's a great time to ask, tell me about a time when you, and then think about something that's important in your company, a core value. But tell me about a time when, I love to ask people about goals that they have for themselves this year, because I find that people that are actively working towards goals in their personal life, however big or small, are going to, actively work towards their 90-day sprints in our company. And they're going to be easier to manage than someone that's not used to driving forward in their personal life as well.
Yeah, we ask, think back on your former coworkers. Who do you want to work with? Please identify 1 to 2 of them and then describe the attributes or values that would make you choose them. Really, that group interview is trying to find value fit.
Sure.
A lot of it. And then we look for micro things that you wouldn't like. We start the Zoom call 10 minutes early, and we look for who joined first, who are the go-getters, like who were early. And then, if you're thinking back on your former coworkers, it's not how they answer so much. We look at the other candidates and see, are they still engaged and paying attention? And then we'll also look and see, did they mention by name who they would want to actually work with again? If you just say, I'd like so-and-so, my supervisor, she was great because of blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, but do you know her name? So candidates that are like, I worked with Susan Lamping and she was amazing because this, and this. So we're looking for alignment of why they wanted to work with them, but then we're looking for really small details like did they know their name? Like, were they personable?
I'm always looking for someone that's an excellent communicator. So when we ask questions about like, tell me about a time when you failed and what happened, or tell me about a time when you had an idea to improve a process in your work, I'm looking for someone that had a clear instance in mind, is able to communicate it, and had like some clear actionable takeaways, someone that's reflective. That comes out in questions like that, versus someone that is just blaming, like, I had this boss who, always, push things off to the last minute. I want to know someone who is going to take responsible for failures, and that, really shows personal insight into the whole reflection process, because we're all going to make mistakes in the workplace. It's how we learn from them, how we grow as individuals and as employees that really help predict the success of us as a team.
This has been really interesting. I actually didn't know this, and so I'm really glad we were able to talk about it. Before we wrap up, being conscious of your time, do you have any interesting resources or apps or books you'd like to share with our audience before we go today?
Required reading is the one thing. That's how we organize our 90-day sprints, I would say.
I think Meetings Suck is also a great quick read.
Cameron Harold's Meetings Suck. That one's really short. We have a vivid vision, so we don't do 5-year plans, but we have a 3-year vivid vision. So that also came from Cameron Harold.
And, there was one question you asked me earlier that we never got a chance back to touch on. And I did want to mention, you asked me earlier, Austin, about a strategy for how you and your spouse can maintain, a bit of like personal life amidst the startup. And, I would be remiss if I didn't mention one thing, which Garret and I did. What we found early on was that trying to set work hours was totally non-productive, as in we were constantly feeling the pull to work more and, do more. And so what we did instead is set a couple of do not work hours through the week. And so like that's Friday nights for us, like, 7:30, like we're not going to be working, or, we have a couple other, do not work hours. And I think that took a lot of stress off of us in terms of like feeling the need to work, but, and embracing the reality that it's going to be a time of really focused work, and you're not going to have that work-life quote balance. But there are seasons. And so for that particular season, just a couple of hours when we know we're not going to be working was enough to sort of sustain the mental break that, we knew we needed for health.
Sure. I think that's a really great tip. I mean, this has been excellent. I have a list of things that I'm going to be taking, including do not work hours, and then the group interviews. I feel like are just such a powerful thing that you can put into play, especially right now when we're all dealing with the realities of hiring in a different climate, hiring in a time with social distancing. It's really a super actionable thing. And thank you for sharing it and sharing some of your wisdom. I feel like we could ask. I have so many more questions, but I also want to be respectful of your time. And Andrew's also got a baby bouncing on his stomach right now. So,
on brand.
Absolutely. And what a great time to be hiring for anyone that's out there. Like the market is huge right now. So.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Thank you both very much for your time.
Yeah,
No, thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you.
All right, here we go. Well, it don't matter. You got money.
Hey guys, it's Austin. And if you've been loving the podcast, you got to go check out brandgrowthexperts.com. That's where I work one-on-one with my clients to help them build faster growing, more profitable online stores. I've got coaching programs and workshops that we host all over the world. Would love to have you come check it out. If you're a fast growing e-commerce business or you want to be a fast growing e-commerce business, you got to check it out. That's the spot for you. We go more in depth than we do in the podcast with comprehensive trainings and coaching to help you scale up. Check it out, brandgrowthexperts.com. See you there.